Good morning is going to be a hot, steamy day with some severe weather to come this evening. Currently, we are looking at temps in the 80s or high 70s throughout Minnesota, South Dakota, with the western side being down at a nice cool 70s, some down into even the 50s right now, where some of the storms are at. We are in an enhanced risk for severe weather today that is driven by a very high wind and hail, as well as we do have a 5% risk for tornado through portions of southwestern Minnesota and central eastern South Dakota, with the 2% spanning through the rest of the Minnesota enhanced risk. Moving on to this hail risk, we have a 30% hatched for where that 5% tornado risk area was, and then following with a 30% non-hatched for the rest of Minnesota, big 15% risk around that, and then even bigger 5% risk around that. Here's our wind outlook. We have a big 30% hatched risk for severe winds today in the spans from Wisconsin all the way down to central South Dakota, with the hatch risk spanning into that 15% risk, which follows as such. Moving over to some weather models, here we have the surface-based CAPE, and as we go into the afternoon, evening time, it starts to intensify and conglomerate, I'll use, down in this Minnesota, northern Iowa region before it starts to die off into those far overnight hours. Looking at our supercell composite, this shows if the storms are more likely to be supercellular, which is rotating storms. And during the afternoon, daytime, we're looking at about 10 to 12 out of a 50 range, which is decent. And then moving into those later afternoon into the evening hours, it starts to intensify in that southwestern Minnesota and northern Nebraska region before really intensifying in that southwestern Minnesota and proceeding to die out into the night. Here we have the significant tornado parameter, or the STP. This shows where it's more likely for tornadoes to be over some of the other areas, and it's mostly low throughout the day. You got some peaks up as we go into the evening, and then it really starts to spike up in that northern Nebraska and southwest Minnesota before we hit far overnight hours where storms should die out. Here we are going to look at the simulated reflectivity for today. Got some discrete cells that are going to pop up around in Minnesota, and then we have this line that follows that's going to bring that high wind and hail probability as we move in through the overnight hours. So different points are going to be definitely different timing, and this is also very much a simulated look at it. It does not mean that it's going to fall out this way. So with the timing of the storms going into that overnight where a lot of people are sleeping, please make sure you have multiple ways to receive alerts in case shelter is needed. And the last thing, I rarely ever ask for this, but we are 6 followers away from being able to stream back on Facebook again, as they implemented a 100 follower requirement for streaming now. So if that is your preferred method of communication and viewing, it would be greatly appreciated if you could drop me a follow there. I hope all you stay safe and have an amazing day.